Many scholars recognize that we need to find the intermediary person to China's modernization. They mediated influences from the West that led to today's modernization. To mediate China's modernization, there are three possible types. The first are soldiers who came to fight. After fighting, they left. The second are business people. After they did their business, earned their money, they also left. Only one kind of people, missionaries. On the one hand, they were very well educated. On the other hand, they delved deeply into the lowest levels of China's society. In this process of mediating modernization, they played very important roles. Some missionaries left their mark on history.
In this journey from closed and isolated to open and cosmopolitan, from darkness to enlightenment, the messengers of God were the ones that led us in our first step forward. In 1815, missionaries printed the first monthly periodical written in Chinese, the Chinese Monthly Magazine. In 1823, China's first letterpress magazine, News from All Lands. In 1832, China's first English periodical, the Chinese Repository. In 1833, China's first Chinese periodical, the Eastern-Western Monthly Magazine. In 1870, the British missionary Timothy Richard came to China and founded the extremely influential Christian Literature Society for China, published a newspaper, Multinational Communique, with missionary young John Allen as editor-in-chief. Kang Youwei, leader of the 100 Days Reform, was an avid reader of the Multinational Communique. Kang said, "I owe my conversion to reform chiefly to the writings of the Reverend Timothy Richard and Dr. Young J. Allen." Another leader of the 100 Days Reform, Liang Chi-Chao, had previously served as Richard's personal secretary. He developed a reading list that he recommended to other Chinese. The Christian Literature Society for China was the publisher of 22 items on his list, chief among them Richard's Essentials of the West's Recent History and Allen's Multinational Communique. Sun Yat-sen, leader of the Xinhai Revolution, entrusted the Multinational Communique to publish his A Letter to Li Hongzheng, further demonstrating the strong influence of this newspaper.
I want to discuss one controversial figure in particular, William Martin, who was a missionary in Ningbo for 10 years. He wrote a very famous book, Evidences of Christianity. In 1858 and then 1860, the Second Opium War occurred, followed by the Treaty of Tianjin and the Convention of Peking, which included negotiations with the American minister to China. Martin became the interpreter for the American minister. That was a huge offense at the time. Through his participation in a negotiation of these treaties, Martin concluded that the Chinese did not understand international law at all. The Chinese would accept the unacceptable and reject what should be accepted during negotiation. For example, extraterritoriality, that would be a huge affront to national sovereignty, the Chinese accepted very quickly. The Chinese people had long followed a simple rule: barbarians rule over barbarians and the Chinese rule over Chinese. Martin expressed his concern, but to no end. On the other hand, he believed that one of the most important clauses for the Chinese to accept, for example, was the exchange of ambassadors and establishment of diplomatic relations. The Chinese government adamantly refused. Why? The Chinese thought that the barbarians were ugly and would be unsightly if they reside in Beijing, and so rejected that proposition. Martin later studied international law, earning a doctorate in law. He felt that a lack of Chinese understanding of international law would leave the country at a disadvantage in exchanges with foreigners. He even translated elements of international law into Chinese. Martin believed that the Chinese needed to improve their education systems so their own people could understand foreign languages, communicate with foreigners, and could improve understanding on both sides. The late Qing dynasty established a school of combined learning to train the Chinese with talent in languages, hiring teachers including the fields of technology, chemistry, and medicine. When it opened up admissions, no one applied because China's imperial examination did not test these subjects. Martin began his opposition to the imperial examination as part of the reforms to save China. The reformers Liang Qichao and Kan Youwei were very close with Martin. Later during the reform, they removed the imperial examination, an important step in the modernization of China. Martin played an important role behind the scenes.